We recently closed on our largest real estate purchase to date, a real estate deal that totaled $2 million between the purchase price and closing costs, meaning anything that has to do with attorney fees, the purchase of points, prepaid interest, prepaid taxes, and anything that goes into the equation. What made this deal very interesting is that we decided to not touch the equity that we have built in our investment portfolio over the years, but instead we wanted to go the traditional route by just simply using our savings. And of course, there were a lot of lessons learned. We made a lot of mistakes, some of them costing thousands of dollars and a couple of tears in between. And that's why I'm creating this video so that you don't have to go through the same thing. Welcome to Novarise, your channel for financial education. In here, we talk about investments in real estate, investments in the stock market, in precious metals, and small businesses. Now, for those who are new, I want to level the playing field. I want to make sure that the new subscribers are in tune with the concepts shared in this channel. If you have been following us for quite some time, thank you so much for your support and thank you beforehand for your patience, okay? So first things first, let's talk about the whole idea of the equity buildup and using that to buy more properties, right? So let's suppose that this is your house or your investment property, whatever that is. So this is your house, and when you purchased it, you most likely paid a down payment, 5, 10, 20. So for this example, let's assume you made a 20% down payment. So that down payment, that 20% is yours. That is your equity. And there's not much you can do with that, truly, because it's something that you need to put down in good faith to prove the lender that you're being serious with the purchase, right? But the story doesn't end here. There are ways for you to keep increasing that equity on the property and eventually be able to use the equity to purchase more real estate. So one way to keep increasing that equity is by making your mortgage payments. So over the years, you will be paying down the debt and you will owe less money. So that means more of the property will be yours as long as you keep paying, right? So let's say that you've had the property for 5 years and you've been making your on-time payments and that you have reduced the debt by 10%. So that 10% becomes part of your equity. So instead of just having 20%, now you have a total of 30%. There are other ways to keep adding equity. And one is by doing nothing, just watching the market and let time do its thing. And you might have noticed that over the years, real estate does go up in price, even though there are corrections here and there. But over the years, over time, in the long run, real estate goes up in price. So if you held your property for a certain amount of years, you will notice that the price will go up in order to adjust for inflation. So let's say you've held your property for a couple of years and now there was a natural market appreciation of 10%. So now you have your 20% that you put down as a down payment, the additional 10% equity that you gain by paying down your mortgage, and now you get an additional 10% for market changes. So now you have a total of 40% in equity, right? But that doesn't end there. There are ways for you to force the appreciation, for you to force that equity to go up. And you can do that by either doing a small cosmetic renovation or by doing a massive full-blown renovation and where you add new bathrooms or new bedrooms and stuff like that, right? So let's say you did one of those projects and you were able to include your property by an additional 20%. So now you have a total equity of 60%. There is 60% sitting right there in that house that you can take to a bank and say, hey, I want to be able to use my equity and get funds from it so I could keep buying more real estate. And the lender will give it to you through a HELOC or a cash out refi. For those who want to learn more about the process, here's a video that you can check out after you're done with this one. That's what I meant by using the equity of our real estate portfolio to keep buying more properties. So like I mentioned in the intro, we decided not to go that route, but instead we wanted to use our savings, right? Now, let's move on to the concept of savings. I had a hard time finding an actual definition online, so I decided to create my own. So savings is cash or funds that you're not using today. Those funds are set aside so you can use them in the future for whatever project you have. So that's the definition I am giving it. Now, in the eyes of the lender, those savings can take many different forms. It could be cash located in your savings account. It could be cash that you parked in the stock market. It could be cash that you parked in cryptocurrency or in your retirement account or precious metals. you name it, right? So for us, we decided to look into 4 different venues. One is by looking into our actual cash savings. We looked into our retirement account. We looked into our precious metals, and we looked into our stock portfolio. So to start off with cash, that's fairly simple. You go into your bank account, your savings account, and you check how much cash you have available for the down payment. So for us, it was very straightforward. We usually don't keep much cash laying around in our bank accounts. Our money is usually invested. So yes, there were some funds that we can use, but nothing out of the ordinary, right? The majority of the funds for our down payment came from our retirement account, and it came from the precious metals. So let's talk about the retirement account. So if you happen to be a W-2 employee and you work at a company, you will most likely have access to a 401k plan. And for those who are small business owners or those who want to set a retirement account aside, you will typically have an IRA, which stands for Individual Retirement Account. So in my case, I happen to have had both. So over the years, I worked many years in corporate. And over the years, every time I signed up for a job, I will take advantage of the 401k plan and the company matching. Now, not all companies offer a company matching, but I was lucky enough to work for companies that did. And for those who don't know what that means, a company matching is funds that companies allocate to your retirement account in addition to what you're putting towards your retirement account. There's usually a minimum that you have to allocate in order to trigger that company matching. So in my case, what I did was I will set aside 5% of my income towards that 401k plan. I didn't have any kids, any family, or any hefty, financial responsibilities. So I was able to set a lot of my income aside. So I will set up 5% of my income aside, and then the company will come in and will match it up to 3%. So when adding 5 and 3%, I was getting a total of 8% of my income allocated towards my 401k plan. And it wasn't just that. That money gets invested, and then the power of compounding kicks in. So over the years, I built a sizable portfolio, so to speak, right? And just like with any career, I outgrew my role, and then I transitioned to another role, and then to another role. And then every time I will change companies, that 401k money that belonged to the old company is free for you to decide what to do with it. So the money that was mine, and of course, I met the minimum years required to take the company matching, I will take those funds and I will roll them over into my new job. Then I will, continue to do my thing, work, set money aside for my retirement plans. And once I transition to the newer role, to a new company, I will take that money and I will roll it over again. And fast forward a couple of years, we created Novarise. And since we are the business owners, we decided to create an IRA. And I took all the money that I contributed in my past years from my 401k and I rolled it over to my IRA account. So when this project came through, Anthony, the co-founder of Novarise, also my husband, and myself, we decided to look into our retirement account and figured out how much money there was and see how much of it can we use. And when checked, my account had a total of $132,000 accumulated over the years. Anthony's portfolio had a similar amount, so we had enough to work with in this case. Now, the next thing was to figure out how to use that money, because as a retirement plan, you're not supposed to use that money unless you are retired. And Anthony and I don't have any plans to retire anytime soon. We love what we do. And so we needed to figure out what could be done to use that money without triggering a 10% penalty and having to pay taxes beforehand, because there's a hefty penalty when you take that money out outside of your retirement years. And that's when I put my knowledge to test. So I knew that with IRA accounts, with 401ks is different, but with IRA accounts, you can actually take the money out and you have 60 days to put it back. To put back all the money, and that way you would avoid taxes and penalties. If you don't put it back within the 60-day time window, and I'm talking about calendar days. So if you don't return it within the 60-day time window, you will have to pay a 10% penalty fee based on the amount that you took out, plus taxes. So that was a very, very hefty amount. And I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking, well, I mean, taking $100 and something thousand is not an easy tax to return within 60 days. And you're right. I didn't know how I was going to put it back either. But I figure, let me deal with one problem at a time. This is the deal. I run all the numbers and it makes sense. I want to put my hands on this deal. And these are the funds that are sitting in my face. And this is what I can do to get it done. In terms of putting the money back, I had 60 days to figure it out. And that was my approach. And the good news is we figured it out. We were able to put the money back within the 60-day time frame. And I'll share the story of how that went in a little bit. So now back to the story of the 60 days. Anthony and I decided to move forward and we started liquidating the stocks inside of our investment portfolio. And that was lesson number one for me because I was under the misunderstanding that the moment that you liquidate your stock, that's when the 60-day clock starts ticking. And I was wrong. So you can actually liquidate your stocks and do transactions, buy and reinvest that money, and it wouldn't count as money leaving the account because technically it's still inside the account. What you did was just simply change the asset. So the clock actually starts ticking when the money leaves your IRA account. And that's where I made the biggest mistake. And here's what I mean. So when you liquidate your stocks and you decide to withdraw the money and take the money out of your retirement portfolio, depending on the brokerage, you're going to be given three options. One is to withdraw that money with a check. One is to withdraw it with an ACH/EFT, which stands for electronic funds transfer, or through a wire transfer. So in my case, a check was out of the question because if they were going to mail me a check, I could risk losing it in the mail or the bank was going to take forever to cash it. So to me, that was not an option. So I was left with two, with the ACH and the wire transfer. So with the ACH transfer, those are free. You don't have to pay a fee. And with a wire transfer, you have to pay a $25 fee in order to get that funds. And that's where I made the mistake. I thought that because I was doing the liquidation ahead of time and I have enough time for the closing, I decided to not pay the $25 fee and wait the 2-3 business days. So that's one of the key distinctions. So if you were to take the money out with an ACH, you would have to wait 2 to 3 days. And with a wire transfer, as long as you do the transaction before 12 o'clock, you will receive the money on the same day. So for me, there was no rush to get it on the same day. And I chose to not spend the $25 and use it for something else. So to my surprise, that was the biggest mistake I did during this whole liquidation coming down with the money for the down payment process because it ended up costing me thousands of dollars. So what happened was that, yes, I did mention that I have $132,000 worth of funds in my retirement portfolio, but I decided to take $118,000 instead. I wanted to leave a little bit there because I just don't want to see my accounts in zero, right? So I took $118,000 out. And what happened with the ACH, at least with my brokerage, was that if you were to take the money out using an ACH, the limit was $100,000, as opposed to a wire transfer, which has a limit up to $1 million. So that means that I had to take the money out in 2 transactions, one for $100,000 and the other one for $18,000. Oh my God, that was the biggest mistake. The biggest mistake. And here's why. It turns out that the IRS allows you to take that money out of your retirement plan and then put it back within 60 days as long as there's only one transaction. Yes, you can do multiple transactions, but they're not going to save you from the tax penalty and paying taxes. Only one transaction will get the assumption of the 10% penalty plus taxes. So post-closing, when I figure everything out and I was able to bring the money back and put it back into my IRA before the 60 days, you have to call your brokerage to let them know that you're about to make that deposit because they need to code it in their system to know that that money actually is going as a payback and not as a regular contribution towards your retirement plan. So when I called the rep, that was where my surprise came in. So this rep said, which of the transactions do you want to use to avoid the tax penalty? And I was like, what transaction? I only did one transaction, right? Because in my mind, I liquidated all my stocks in one day. So that's one transaction. And she explained that that wasn't the case. A transaction counts when the money leaves the account. And because I did one transfer for $100,000 and then another transfer for $18,000, that counts as 2 transactions. So which one do you want to use to avoid the whole penalty situation. And so, I mean, to me, it was a no-brainer. Of course, the $100,000. And so I ended up putting $100,000 back into my retirement account, and I decided not to put back the remaining $18,000 because it just didn't make any sense. Because why? $18,000, I will have to pay a 10% penalty out of that $18,000. That's $1,800. Very expensive. And in addition to that, I have to pay taxes on it. So I'd rather just set aside those $18,000 to cover that tax liability at the end of the year, because that's when you pay it. You don't pay it at the moment. You pay it at the time you're about to file your taxes. Very costly mistake, very painful. Make sure you don't do it. That's why I'm creating this video, so you don't have to do the same mistakes I did. Now, moving along, that was for the IRA. Let's talk about the transaction with precious metals. And when I talk about precious metals, I am not talking about regular jewelry. They actually lose their value in the resale market. Why? Because jewelry is not seen as pure gold, right? In this case, we're talking about gold. Gold and jewelry gets mixed up with other metals, so they're considered impure. So when you're about to pawn it or to sell them to another jewelry, they're going to take a big discount off the price, and you're going to lose a lot of money because they also have to do the work to remove the impurities and to, turn that metal into something else. When I talk about investing in precious metals, I'm talking about investment grade coins or investment grade bullions that are widely recognized as investments and that they will retain their value. So funny enough, even though the metals are called investment grade metals, I don't necessarily view precious metals as investment. I view them as insurance to protect my money against inflation or the loss of value with the dollar, right? So over the years, we heard from Robert Kiyosaki, buy gold, buy gold, buy gold and silver, and so we did, right? I didn't question it because he's one of the reasons why I was able to do all of this. So we figure if he's saying we should buy it, then we should just buy it. So over the years, we amassed a sizable amount of gold coins. And so the time came, and this time we decided to liquidate them all and put all that money into this one big project and hope for the best, right? So a couple of lessons learned from this transaction. When you buy investment grade gold coins or bullion, you typically go to certified dealers that will sell you those gold coins / bullions. So it turns out that during my research, you can actually go back to the same dealers and sell them those gold coins. So during this whole research process, I learned a couple of things. One of them is choosing the dealer that best suits your need. So there were some dealers that were out of state that we purchased from, and there were some gold dealers that were physically closer to us. Some of them were in New York City. Some of them were actually out in New Jersey. So when it comes to selling the gold coins, you need to take them to the dealer. One way is by mail, and the other way is just simply by physically going into your gold dealer store. So for us, mailing the gold to the original gold dealer was not an option because things get lost in the mail. And I also read in the news that there are a lot of scammers that are intercepting your packages. So let's say they know who you are, they recognize you, they follow you. And the moment the package leaves FedEx or UPS or whatever servicer you're using, they get intercepted. Sometimes they get stolen and it never arrives to the destination. So we did not care if the gold dealer, let's say in Texas, gave us the highest payout as possible because we knew that the risk was higher if the package were lost or stolen. So we decided to discard those dealers, and we picked those dealers that were physically closer to us. Dealers that we can just hop on the car, drive over there, and be able to, hey, here's the gold, please tell us how much it's worth, right? So that's one. Now, the next thing that we learned was figuring out the price. So I knew that when it comes to buying gold, you need to check the spot price, but I didn't know that when it comes to selling your gold, you also need to use the spot price as a benchmark. So for those who don't know, a spot price is basically the price of gold at that particular spot in time, because gold does change price during the day. So you can go in the morning and pay a certain amount for a piece of gold, and then in the afternoon you can go and buy another investment grade coin at a different price. So they change. So gold dealers are actively looking into the Kitco app or the Kitco website, and that will tell you the spot price at that point in time that you're buying. So that's one thing. That's how you determine what the spot price is. Then, depending on the dealer, they will charge you a fee for buying your gold, because remember, they also also need to make a profit when they're about to resell that piece of gold. So in our research, we learned that the range for the fee could go somewhere between 5% to 12%. It will highly depend on the state. Some states might charge more. I don't know that, but we looked into the ones that were closer to us, and that was the range, 5 to 12%. And of course, the higher the fee, the lower the payout you get. So let's say, for example, if you take 100% and you win with a dealer that will charge you a 10%, you will minus that 10%, and that will leave you a payout of only 90%. So let's say if the spot price was $2,900 for 1 ounce of gold coin, when you multiply that by 90%, you will get $2,610. That's the payout you will receive per ounce of gold that you sell. So we made up our mind. We decided to head into the gold dealer with an X amount. And then once they inspect those coins, the dealer will ask you, how do you want to get paid? Cash, check, or wire. They usually don't like wires. If they do, they usually do it for a very low amount. Cash was not an option for us because I just didn't feel comfortable carrying a bunch of cash down in the street or heading out to the bank. So this time around, we went for the check. Even though it will take longer to liquidate and appear in our bank account, we did this with enough time in advance that it will allow time for the checks to liquidate and still be able to move forward with the closing. So we passed the inspection, all good to go. The gold dealer gave us a check and a receipt, a detailed receipt that lists how many coins they bought from us and the type of coin they bought from us. Keeping a copy of this receipt is extremely important because the lenders will ask you for it. They want to make sure that the funds that you're bringing to the closing as down payments are coming from legitimate sources, and at the same time that you don't owe money to anybody. They don't want you going to your uncle, your mom, your dad, or your sisters or friends borrowing money. They want to be the only one in this whole lending equation. So it is very important that you keep a copy of the receipt so that way you can show them that this is what you did. And we also picked the check for that same reason because cash usually doesn't have a trail, but checks do because the image of the check will appear in your bank statement and the lender can use that to confirm that they belong to the same transaction. In addition to that, we were also required to provide the invoice of the original purchase of the gold. So 3 pieces of document. The invoice evidencing that we originally purchased the gold and that it is in fact ours, plus a copy of the check, which you will get in your bank statement, plus a copy of the receipt that you get when you sell your gold. So that was the experience with gold. Now, moving on to the stock market, that's fairly easy. We just pick the stocks that we wanted to sell in our brokerage and we just liquidate them. And bear in mind that having a stock brokerage is not the same as your retirement portfolio. Your stock brokerage is free for you to use whenever you want. Your retirement portfolio is a little bit different because it is your retirement. And I know that depending on where you are in your life, some of you might disagree with our move of using our retirement money. But the truth is what makes sense for us because we're not taking our retirement money to just buy random stuff. We're taking our retirement money to buy another asset that's going to generate money and then generate money so we can put it back. Yes, maybe our retirement portfolio took a hit when we took that money out, but we parked it in another asset that's making more money and they sort of balance each other out. At least that's what I like to hope. If not, then I will be creating another video sharing the mistakes and the lessons learned that I got from this experience as well. And there you have it. That's how we came up with the down payment for the largest acquisition to date and the lessons learned from our mistake. And while I still have you here, I want to remind you to check out this video and where I talk about the 2 different tools that you can leverage to extract the equity from your property and keep buying more real estate. See you in the next video. Bye-bye.